Hello there everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Elliot Webber, and in today's video we're going to be doing something again a little bit different. Today over the past couple of days I've been pondering what would the 2024 BTCC grid look like if they all used electric cars. So let's get straight into this. Now, before all the Facebook mobs come after me, I just want to reiterate that this is just an idea that, it's an interesting thing, to me at least, about what the touring car grid specifically, so what cars would the teams use. That's literally all I'm doing. I'm not trying to do an electric touring car propaganda. I'm not even pro-electric, if I'm being completely honest. So this is just a little thing. It's just a bit of fun. You don't need your pitchforks. Just put them down, have a cup of tea, relax. Everything's going to be fine. So let's start off with Team BMW, West Surrey Racing, or MB Motorsport. So basically the two BMW teams, or just the entire BMW fleet. Now, this one was quite interesting. I had to do a lot of research for all of these. I had to figure out what cars were actually electric from all the manufacturers. So we are still going to, so for example, West Surrey Racing, I'm still going to find electric BMWs. For Napa, it will be a Ford. For Accelerate, it will be a Hyundai. You get the picture now, so on and so forth. Of course, some of these won't realistically, well, of course, none of these would realistically happen anyway, but you get the gist anyway. So starting off with BMW, and to be honest, I'm going to keep this one a little bit realistic. I think if BMW were to use an electric touring car, I think they would simply use the G28 model of the BMW i3. Now, for those of you who don't know, I'm not on about the current i3 that we know in the UK. I'm talking about the i3, the G28 model, which is essentially the BMW 330, but fully electric. Now, this car, of course, as I've mentioned, isn't available in the UK. In fact, I do actually think it's a Chinese-only car. So this car is available in China. Hello to any Chinese viewers. But yeah, so basically, I just think that, yeah, this one is the most realistic out of all of these in this completely non-realistic video. So I do think BMW / West Surrey Racing would use the G28 BMW i3. So now let's move on to Napa or Alliance Racing. So moving on to Napa / Alliance Racing, of course, technically the factory forward team in BTCC, and this one was actually quite a struggle. I literally had to go through all the manufacturers that compete in BTCC. I had to find a list of all their current cars that are in production, and the only Ford that I could find, the only fully electric Ford that I could find was, of course, that Mustang Mach-E, the SUV electric Mustang that isn't a Mustang, because come on. So yeah, that was the only car that I could find that's currently in production. And I just thought, well, I don't really want to use that. But luckily, I did actually find out that there will be an electric version of the Ford Puma launching at some point later this year. So I thought, okay, I'll use that. So if Napa Racing were to use an electric car in the BTCC, I think they would use the Ford Puma Gen E, the electric version of the Ford Puma that we see on the roads currently today. Again, of course, not realistic at all, because the Ford Puma doesn't conform to the current regulations of BTCC. But I looked at the Ford Puma, which is being used in the World Rally Championship, or WRC, being run by Ford, and it's a good car in the Rally 1 spec, and I think it would look good in an NGTC spec type thing. I don't know. So yeah, but that's basically it for Napa. I think, yeah, if they of course kept on using Fords, I think they would use the Ford Puma Gen E. So now let's move on to Accelerate Motorsport. In fact, we're going to do 2-in-1 in this part of the video. Here we're going to start off with Accelerate Motorsport, and again, as I mentioned, I still think they'd use a Hyundai, and again, I had to do a lot of digging, and to my surprise, I couldn't actually find that many electric cars. I thought Hyundai were one of the ones that, of course, they are one of the ones that are pushing electrification. but turns out they don't really have many electric cars in production. But luckily I managed to find one, and it was the Hyundai Ioniq 6, which is of course a fully electric car. I don't think it's available yet, and I actually don't think it's available in the UK. I'm not too sure. So yeah, so I think Accelerate would use the Hyundai Ioniq 6. It's a very... I'm not too sure what the right word is. So yeah, but it's a very intriguing car to me. Some of the pictures that I looked at, and some pictures that I'll obviously put up on screen. It's an interesting looking car. That's probably the word I'd use, interesting, as most of these cars are. So yeah, so for Accelerate / Hyundai, I think they would use the Hyundai Ioniq 6. So yeah, now swiftly segueing into Speedworks Motorsport, or as we know at the minute, the factory Toyota team. Now again, similar to Hyundai, I couldn't find many electric cars in production from Toyota. So then I was like, okay, I'll keep digging. And luckily I managed to find an electric car. So this one is basically by default, I think, and it would be the Toyota BZ3. I think that's what it's called. Again, I don't think this car will be available or is available. I don't think it's available in the UK pretty much. The majority of these cars I don't think are available, or they won't be available once they hit production, because of course I think a few of these cars haven't actually been released yet, as I mentioned with the Ford Puma, the electric Puma, that's not been released yet. So yeah, but yeah, for Toyota, I would pick the Toyota BZ3. I believe that's what it's called. I'm probably wrong, but actually, no, I can't remember. I'll put up its full title and stuff like that. So yeah, that's basically the cars I would use for Accelerate and Toyota. So now let's move on to the next team, which I believe on my list is Restart Racing and Unlimited Motorsport. So yes, moving on to the next two teams, and I'm going to be talking about two teams again this time, because as I've mentioned, this is using the fact that the teams will be using electric versions from the current manufacturers of the cars they use. So because both Unlimited and Restart are both using Cupras, I think they would use Cupras. Now there is an electric version, I believe, of the Cupra Leon that's currently being used in BTCC, but I thought that was a bit boring. So I decided to switch it up a bit, make it a bit more spicy. So I think both Unlimited and Restart would use the Cupra Born, I believe a car that's just been recently released to the public, I think. And this one is actually technically the most realistic out of the lot of them, because the Cupra Born is actually a race car. I believe just made 2 TCR homologations. In fact, just the other week, the Cupra Born made its racing debut in the Scandinavian Touring Car Championship, because the Scandinavian Touring Car Championship, or the STCC, has actually started using electrification. They are now moving on to electrification. The Scandinavian touring cars are now using fully electric cars. And actually, that was actually the idea for this video. So yeah, very interesting stuff. So yeah, that's why I think these teams using the Cupra Born is actually the most realistic out of a lot of them. Now, let's move on to PowerMax, the final team, and this one is probably the most unrealistic of them all. So the final team on this list, PowerMax Racing. Now, this one was actually the most difficult. I, of course, wanted to make sure that every team was using a car from the same manufacturer. But unfortunately, looking at Vauxhall, they currently don't have any electric cars that are in production. Now, again, I wanted to kind of limit myself. I wanted to make some rules for this list. I didn't want to use cars that aren't yet in production. I wasn't going to use any concept cars. I wanted to use cars that are currently in production. So that's why I've used the cars on this list. Now, so this one I had to improvise a bit. I couldn't use any Vauxhalls because there aren't any electric Vauxhalls out at the minute. Apart from, I believe there is an electric version of the Vauxhall Mocha, but I didn't really want to use that car. I tried to stay away from SUVs unless absolutely necessary. So yeah, I didn't want to use SUVs. Like I mentioned earlier with Napa, I didn't want to use the Mustang Mach-E. So yeah, so again, I improvised a bit. So technically, I can get away with this one. Of course, if you don't know already, Vauxhall is now owned by a parent group called Stellantis, which is basically a merger between Fiat and Peugeot. So I thought, okay, why don't I just use a car from Peugeot, being as Peugeot and Vauxhall are basically one in the same now. And so I thought, okay, what about the 308? So I looked at the Peugeot 308, and thankfully, there is an electric version of the Peugeot 308 called the E308, which I don't think has been released yet to the public, but it is a car currently on Peugeot's production line. So yeah, I think Powermax Racing would use a Peugeot 308 or the E308, so Peugeot 308 basically, but just electrified. Is that the right terminology? I guess so, electrified. So like The Rock, basically. So yeah, anyway, that's basically it, guys. That is what the 2024 touring car grid would look like if the cars were under electrification, which thankfully they are not, and hopefully will never be. As I mentioned at the start of the video, this is not an electric propaganda thing. I am not pro electrification of the roads. If anything, I'm still pro combustion, but to be totally honest, I'm actually pro hydrogen, as we saw at Goodwood last year. But anyway, let's not talk about that, because that's a whole argument for Facebook and Twitter and whatnot. So anyway, if you have enjoyed this video, please be sure to like this video, share it with your mates as well, because it of course does help my channel grow, and of course press that red subscribe button, because we are firmly on the road to 300 subscribers. And don't worry, people, do not worry. Do you remember the mini series that I've been doing on my channel these past couple of days? That is coming. It's just at time of recording, it's Wednesday, which means Thursday is actually my birthday. So this is, at time of recording, this is my last video as a teenager. So yeah, that's going to be fun. But yeah, anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I will see all of you in the next one. Goodbye.